Picture a nation that has faced over 2,000 years of invasions, occupations, and struggles for survival, yet emerged from each catastrophe stronger and more unified than before.
This is Korea, a peninsula whose strategic location between China and Japan made it both a bridge between civilizations
and a battlefield for competing empires. From ancient tribal confederations to modern economic
powerhouses, Korea's story is one of remarkable resilience, brilliant innovation, and an unbreakable will to preserve cultural identity against overwhelming odds. What makes Korea's journey so extraordinary isn't just the dramatic battles or political upheavals, but how its people consistently transformed foreign challenges into opportunities for growth. They invented technologies that revolutionized communication, created art that influenced entire regions, and developed diplomatic strategies that allowed a small nation to survive between superpowers. But perhaps most importantly, they proved that cultural identity can endure even the most determined attempts at erasure. The Korean Peninsula's geographic position has been both its greatest blessing and its most persistent curse. Situated at the crossroads of East Asian civilization, Korea became a natural conduit for ideas, technologies, and trade flowing between the Chinese mainland and the Japanese archipelago. Yet this same location made the peninsula irresistible to conquerors who saw it as either a stepping stone to greater prizes or a vital buffer against potential enemies. Understanding Korea's history means grasping this fundamental tension between opportunity and vulnerability. Every Korean dynasty, from the earliest kingdoms to modern governments, has wrestled with the same essential question: how does a nation maintain independence while living in the shadow of powerful neighbors? The answers Korean leaders found to this dilemma shaped not only their own destiny, but influenced the entire course of East Asian history. Our journey begins in the mists of antiquity, around 700 BCE, when the first Korean kingdom emerged from tribal confederations scattered across the peninsula. Gojoseon, as historians call this early state, established its capital near modern-day Pyongyang and represented humanity's first attempt to create unified government on Korean soil. Archaeological evidence reveals a sophisticated society with extensive trade networks, advanced metallurgy, and complex social hierarchies. But even these earliest Koreans faced the geographic reality that would define their descendants' struggles. Chinese records describe Gojoseon as wealthy and well-organized, yet increasingly drawn into China's expanding sphere of influence. The relationship began as mutually beneficial trade, but gradually evolved into something more complex and problematic. Chinese luxury goods found in northern Korean tombs tell the story of deepening economic integration, while southern burial sites contain primarily local products, suggesting early regional divisions that would echo through centuries. This north-south cultural divide became formalized around 400 BCE with the emergence of the Jin state in southern Korea. Remarkably, the boundary between Jin and Gojoseon ran close to what would later become the 38th parallel, hinting that geography itself seemed to predestine Korea's eventual division. The pattern was established. Northern Korea looked toward continental Asia for inspiration and opportunity, while the South maintained greater cultural independence and developed more insular traditions. The dance between independence and foreign influence reached its first climax during China's Han Dynasty expansion. Chinese armies conquered Gojoseon around 108 BCE, incorporating the peninsula into their empire and establishing administrative colonies. For over a century, Korea experienced direct foreign rule, yet this occupation planted seeds of resistance that would bloom into one of East Asia's most formidable military powers. When the Han Dynasty collapsed in the 2nd century CE, Korean leaders seized their moment. From the ruins of foreign occupation rose Goguryeo, a kingdom that would transform Korea from a victim of Chinese expansion into a regional superpower capable of challenging China itself. This transformation required a complete reimagining of Korean society, culture, and military capabilities. Goguryeo's founders understood that survival required more than just declaring independence. It demanded the strength to defend that independence against any challenger. They systematically militarized Korean society, constructing massive fortress complexes across their territory and developing elite cavalry units that became legendary throughout East Asia. These weren't merely soldiers, but master horsemen who could fire arrows with devastating accuracy while riding at full gallop, a skill that proved decisive in countless battles. The strategy succeeded beyond anyone's wildest expectations. At its peak, Goguryeo controlled not only the Korean Peninsula, but vast territories in Manchuria, making it one of East Asia's three great powers alongside China and the emerging Japanese state. For the first time in recorded history, Korean armies were marching into Chinese territory as conquerors rather than defending their homeland from Chinese invasion. This golden age of Korean military power created something precious that survives to this day: national pride. Modern Koreans, whether in the north or south, still look back on Goguryeo as proof that their ancestors could stand as equals to any nation on earth. The kingdom's success stories became foundational myths that would sustain Korean identity through centuries of subsequent struggles. Yet Goguryeo's very success created new challenges. The kingdom's expansion alarmed neighbors and attracted powerful enemies, while internal succession disputes weakened central authority. Most significantly, the rise of unified Japan under the Yamato dynasty introduced a third major player into East Asian geopolitics, fundamentally altering the strategic balance that had allowed Goguryeo to flourish. Japanese unification created unexpected opportunities in southern Korea. As Japanese merchants established trade routes with China, southern Korean kingdoms found themselves perfectly positioned to profit from this commerce. The wealth generated by serving as intermediaries between Japan and China allowed these southern states, Silla, Baekje, and Gaya, to develop independent power bases and eventually challenge Goguryeo's authority over the entire peninsula. The resulting period of the three kingdoms transformed Korea into a battlefield where competing visions of Korean civilization clashed. Each kingdom developed distinct characteristics. Goguryeo remained the great military power. Baekje became renowned for its cultural sophistication and diplomatic skills, while Silla emerged as the most commercially successful and internationally connected. This competition drove remarkable innovations across all three kingdoms. Buddhism flourished as rulers competed to build the most magnificent temples, while Confucian scholarship advanced as kingdoms sought to demonstrate their cultural refinement. Korean artisans, scientists, and scholars made contributions that influenced development throughout East Asia, establishing Korea as a major center of learning and creativity. The three-way competition ultimately ended through a combination of brilliant strategy and controversial alliance. Silla's rulers recognized that defeating both Goguryeo and Baekje required external assistance, so they formed a partnership with China's Tang dynasty. This alliance provided Silla with the resources needed to conquer their rivals, but it also established a dangerous precedent of inviting foreign powers to intervene in Korean affairs. Silla's victory in 668 CE created the first unified Korean state in history, but unification came at a price. The kingdom's dependence on Chinese support raised questions about Korean independence that would persist for centuries. Yet Silla proved surprisingly adept at managing this challenge, gradually reducing Chinese influence while maintaining beneficial relationships with both China and Japan. The unified Silla period represents one of Korea's greatest cultural flowerings. The capital at Gyeongju became one of the world's largest cities, filled with magnificent Buddhist temples, Confucian academies, and bustling markets that attracted merchants from across the known world. Korean innovations in art, literature, astronomy, and technology during this era influenced development throughout East Asia and established many cultural traditions that remain distinctly Korean today. This golden age demonstrated Korea's remarkable ability to synthesize foreign influences into something uniquely Korean. Silla absorbed the best elements from Chinese and Japanese civilizations while maintaining distinctly Korean approaches to governance, social organization, and cultural expression. The result was a sophisticated society that served as a bridge between East Asian civilizations while developing its own distinctive character. However, even the most successful dynasties eventually faced decline, and Silla's came in the early 10th century when aristocratic factions began fighting for control. The kingdom fragmented into competing local powers, creating exactly the kind of chaos that Korea's neighbors had learned to exploit. Once again, foreign intervention would reshape Korean politics and society. The man who reunified Korea was Wang Geon, a local strongman who formed an alliance with Japanese supporters and used this backing to systematically conquer Silla's remnants. His victory in 935 CE established the Goryeo dynasty, from which the modern name Korea derives. Goryeo represented a conscious attempt to learn from Silla's successes while avoiding its failures, particularly the dangerous precedent of excessive foreign dependence. Goryeo's rulers moved the capital to Kaesong, strategically located to better control both northern and southern territories. This relocation symbolized their commitment to bridging regional differences and creating a more unified Korean identity. The strategy succeeded brilliantly, as Goryeo became renowned for innovations that pushed the boundaries of human knowledge and capability. The dynasty's most famous achievement was the invention of movable metal-type printing by Choi Yun-ui around 1230, over 2 centuries before Gutenberg's press appeared in Europe. This breakthrough revolutionized the spread of knowledge and literacy throughout East Asia, demonstrating Korea's capacity for world-changing innovation. Goryeo scholars also made significant advances in astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and engineering that influenced development across the region. Yet technological brilliance couldn't protect Goryeo from the greatest military force in human history. The Mongol Empire, having conquered China and established the Yuan dynasty, turned its attention to Korea in the 13th century. The Mongol invasions were catastrophic, representing systematic attempts to destroy Korean resistance and incorporate the peninsula into their global empire. Cities burned, populations fled or perished, and Korea's carefully constructed civilization faced near total destruction. For nearly a century, Korea became a Mongol tributary, forced to provide massive tribute and resources for their overlords' military campaigns. Most humiliatingly, the Mongols demanded Korean assistance in their planned invasion of Japan, making Korea an unwilling participant in attacks against its neighbor. The failed Mongol invasions of Japan, destroyed by typhoons the Japanese called kamikaze or divine winds, had lasting consequences for Korean security. Japanese leaders now viewed Korea as a fundamental threat, a potential base for future attacks against Japan. This perception would influence Japanese strategic thinking for centuries and ultimately contribute to Japan's own invasions of Korea. When Mongol power finally collapsed, Korea once again seized the opportunity for independence. General Yi Seong-gye, originally ordered to attack China's new Ming dynasty, instead turned his armies toward the capital and established the Joseon dynasty in 1392. This bold move avoided a devastating war with China while creating Korea's longest-lasting dynasty, which would rule for over 5 centuries. Early Joseon represented a remarkable renaissance in Korean civilization. King Sejong the Great, ruling in the 15th century, became one of Korea's most celebrated monarchs by promoting advances in science, technology, arts, and education. His greatest achievement was creating Hangul, the Korean alphabet that democratized literacy and became a crucial component of Korean national identity. Hangul was revolutionary not just for Korea, but for the world. Unlike Chinese characters that required years of study to master, Hangul was designed so ordinary people could learn to read and write quickly. This innovation preserved and strengthened Korean cultural identity while making knowledge accessible to all social classes. The early Joseon Golden Age came to a catastrophic end in 1592 when Japan's Toyotomi Hideyoshi launched massive invasions aimed at conquering China through Korea. The Japanese forces were formidable, hundreds of thousands of veteran warriors equipped with advanced firearms and proven tactics. Initially, the invasion proceeded exactly as planned. with Japanese armies rapidly advancing through the peninsula. Korea's salvation came from an unexpected source, the sea. Admiral Yi Sun-sin recognized that while Japanese forces dominated on land, they remained dependent on naval supply lines vulnerable to attack. Yi developed innovative ship designs, including the famous turtle ships, heavily armored vessels that could ram enemy ships while remaining protected from return fire. Yi's naval campaigns became legendary. In his most famous victory, he defeated a Japanese fleet of 330 ships with only 12 Korean vessels, achieving this triumph without losing a single ship. By systematically destroying Japanese supply lines, Yi's navy effectively stranded enemy land forces in hostile territory, forcing their eventual retreat. The Japanese invasions, lasting 7 years and claiming approximately 250,000 lives, left Korea devastated but not broken. The shared experience of surviving foreign invasion strengthened Korean national identity and demonstrated the importance of military innovation and diplomatic skill in preserving independence. Following Hideyoshi's death in 1598, succeeding Japanese rulers abandoned continental expansion and adopted isolation policies. This decision, combined with Korea's need for recovery, created an unusual period of peace in East Asia. Korea used this respite to implement extensive reforms and enter another golden age of cultural and economic development. The Joseon dynasty's recovery was so successful that Korea became one of East Asia's most prosperous and literate societies. Innovations in agriculture, crafts, education, and administration dramatically improved living conditions while strengthening state capacity. Korean culture flourished, producing advances in literature, art, and science that rivaled previous golden ages. This era of peace and prosperity lasted until the 19th century, when Western powers arrived in East Asia with advanced industrial technology and aggressive expansionist ideologies. The Western challenge was unlike anything Korea had faced before. Previous threats had come from neighboring Asian powers with similar cultural foundations and comparable capabilities. Korea's response to Western pressure would determine the kingdom's fate and influence the peninsula's development for generations. The decisions made during this critical period would ultimately lead to Japanese colonization, division into competing states, and the ongoing challenges of modern Korean history. From ancient Gojoseon to the threshold of the modern era, Korean history demonstrates how a strategically located nation can survive and prosper despite facing constant pressure from powerful neighbors. Through military innovation, diplomatic skill, cultural creativity, and sheer determination, Koreans repeatedly transformed challenges into opportunities while preserving their essential identity. The patterns established in Korea's earliest history, balancing between powerful neighbors, embracing beneficial foreign influences while maintaining cultural independence, and developing innovative solutions to existential challenges, continue to shape Korean approaches to the modern world. Understanding this remarkable historical journey provides crucial insights into how small nations can thrive in a world dominated by superpowers while staying true to their fundamental values and aspirations.